Hey, the Switch 2 and my thoughts after the couple of days I've had it playing around things. So, first and foremost, the handheld itself, it feels quite nice. The buttons are not as clicky as they used to be. They used to be obnoxiously clicky. The minus button is obviously still annoying to press. The kickstand, I prefer the way they did it on OLED. Also, we can see the micro SD express slot is still at the bottom, but not in a spot where you're gonna hit it. I had this issue before OLED, where the kickstand, you sometimes just press it on the micro SD card and pop out, but here I don't think it's gonna happen, especially considering that I'll go either here and just use my fingers. I don't even need to dig into the grill intake. That's nice that at least they kept the new fancier kickstand. Other things, you have way smoother feeling sticks. They're not Hall effect. People are complaining about it, but here's the thing. It's attached with magnets, so it would interfere. And honestly, the rails feel amazing, although there are already reports of, stick drift. The buttons up top, they're pretty close to what they would be on OLED. The top USB-C port for things like charging is pretty good. I really like it. The game card slot, you pull it from the back, but you have a big ridge. So that tiny regression you had in OLED is gone. It tends to be way better at reading games consistently. My copy of Minecraft would be cursed on both my Marika Switch and my OLED. This one doesn't suffer from it. It seems that there's right now a slight glitch where if you put a Switch 1 game and then you put a Switch 2 game back in, like my Mario Kart copy, it doesn't read it. And you have to reboot it, because it will just get a reader. It's kinda weird. The cartridges are physically the same size, they go into a Switch 1, but the dumping tools you use usually don't work right now. I hope that changes, because it would be cool to back up your Switch 2 games. Yeah, honestly, the handheld itself feels quite premium, well, outside of the screen. It's nice that it's 1080p, but it's a mediocre IPS panel. The HDR it has is basically next to unnoticeable. Quite a smudgy piece of crap in terms of the display, but I'm assuming it's a cost-effective measure. I mean, the fact that they managed to put this piece of kit for like, $450 is pretty insane. It's a lot of money, but all things considered, still pretty cheap. Also, don't worry about this. I'm waiting to wash my hair, so I get a bunch of steam to get rid of dust, so I can reapply a second screen protector I have without dealing with dust. It's fine for now. You have the game chat button. I haven't used game chat. I only used game share with a friend as a test thing. Works surprisingly well locally. Like, there's pretty much no input lag. Unfortunately, it shrinks down stuff. When it comes to Joy-Con 2 themselves, I don't really use them as singular ones, so the improved buttons are also a part of the attachment system because they are metallic and they stick to the magnets. They feel better. They're not 100% backwards compatible for obvious reasons with Switch 1 Joy-Con, but you can just pair those if you need a game. For example, let's say I wanted to play Ring Fit Adventure. I could just do that to play it on Switch 2. You have these tiny, probably Teflon feet for sliding it in mouse mode. They work fine, but it's super wobbly when you do it that way. It's usable, especially on a pinch. And you're supposed to use the official straps, which are not magnetic at all. Just put it from the bottom, bam. I have some complaints about these. The feet aren't of the best quality. I mean, they're bigger, they glide, but the skates are nowhere close to any mouse you have. So I'm kinda looking into the possibility of getting 3D printed, mouse attachment. Maybe it's a little bit wider, but doesn't change the shape of it, because you still use Joy-Cons as controllers in games. So, for example, if you have a Switch 2, you want to try out mouse mode, just get Fortnite, it's free. So they don't slide as well, and also the strap attachment. It goes out straight, so it can snag along the surface you're gliding it on. Typically in mice, I think this mouse does it. I don't know if you've noticed something. It points upward so it doesn't interfere. This is a wire mice, it actually has a proper design thing here where it's angled upwards, so the cable doesn't drag along the surface you're mousing on. If they made this angled outwards like this a little bit, it would probably significantly improve this. The sensor itself is surprisingly good. The only complaint I have about it is LED. It's insanely high. I wish they did something so if you lift it, it doesn't try to do the whole mousing thing. But I'm assuming it's for like use on awkward surfaces and stuff. And also there's input lag, probably because this is a Bluetooth thing. So yeah, that's that. When it comes to games, right now there isn't that much in terms of native Switch 2 stuff. They literally put out today a Switch 2 update for Splatoon 3. It's pretty amazing. It basically just gets slightly higher shadow quality and higher resolutions. Fixed 1080p in handheld, above 1080p docked. It basically I get super sampling because I use 1080p display. So that's pretty awesome. Mario Kart looks really nice. Fixed 1080p on the display. No way, but again, it still looks quite good in handheld. And I get, super sampling and docked. When it comes to Switch 1 titles, though, it's a mess. They use really bad upscaling to do to go from the 720p display of an old Switch to 1080 here. It doesn't look that great. I wish they would have some options like either 1-to-1 pixel mapping, which they kinda have. If you have Super Mario Odyssey, try going into the VR1 mode and put it in the cardboard VR thingy, and it will actually try to 1-to-1 pixel map the thing. Bizarre, I know. I wish they would do it. 3DS would have it for DS games and so on, especially with how low the resolution was. It also has awful scalars. Or just let me use docked mode. Pretend that this is a docked Switch 1, then it would, target 1080p output in more games. And based on how enhanced Switch 1 releases of games, so Super Mario Odyssey, Bowser's Fury, now Splatoon 3, how those games run, this is significantly more powerful than a docked Switch. It will generally tend to have enough GPU horsepower to basically fix it in 1080p if a game uses dynamic resolution. And in general, games tend to run quite a bit better. Most of the frame drops are basically gone. Dynamic resolution tends to just be maxed out constantly. Faster loading times, quite noticeably faster loading times in those games. Some games aren't that great. I've noticed that audio emulation in TGM2, the Switch release, is slightly worse than it was on Switch 1, but it was admittedly great. And also, the battery life. Coming from having used a Switch OLED for years now, it feels awful to have basically 2 hours of playtime. I thought maybe I was running into the glitch, but I basically let the battery run out and stuff. It actually reports it properly, Let's move on to controllers. So here's the Switch 2 Pro controller. It's amazing. You have a headphone jack. Unfortunately, if you plug a wired headset into it, it's kind of like using a Bluetooth headset in terms of audio latency. It's noticeable to me, so I don't like it. But hey, in a pinch it works. Maybe you're not that sensitive to it, or maybe you're playing a game where it doesn't really matter. It feels way better than the Pro Controller 1. At first glance, it looks almost the same. You have these back paddles. They're not the best back paddles I've used, but still nice to have them on a controller. They're super fast to remap. You just pop into the quick settings in a game, you select a paddle, press the button, and it's mapped. You don't need to go out of a game. I've literally adjusted my settings mid-Splatoon match and didn't really even go for much trouble because it's faster than respawning. The buttons are a little bit snappier. These are a little bit bigger, but still, it's not a diamond, it's squashed. It's like a tiny Super Nintendo thing I absolutely love about the Pro Controller and the Super Nintendo controller. I don't like that they still stuck with the offset stick design, but these buttons feel a little bit better. L and R. ZL and ZR, they're also a little bit more rubber domey, and the travel's a little bit tighter. Plus and minus stick out, really nice touch. So you can easily feel them, and they're not overly clicky. Sticks are amazing. These are basically bespoke sticks that Nintendo did with Alps Alpine, as far as I know. They're actually on ZIF modules, flat tapes. They're super smooth even along the ring. I don't really need to Teflon tape mod them. I don't see any marks from using the sticks like this. Actually, let me take a close look. Yep, after using it quite a bit, no marks on it, and typically you develop marks quite fast. Again, super smooth, quite tight, maybe not as tight as, let's say, 8-bit Hall effects, and as far as I know, these are not Hall effect sticks. Whatever, basically the only first-party controllers that had Hall effect sticks were Sega ones, of all things. So again, super tight sticks, super smooth, the tension kinda builds up as you pull along, and they have super thin stems, so the range of motion is way bigger than on the same sticks of roughly the same size, right? I would say this is the new state of art for first party analog sticks. I prefer those to let's say the PS5 sticks, because the stock PS5 sticks are amazing, but these feel a little bit better. And you can, for example, set up something like a back paddle to Alt in Splatoon 3 and stuff, because I've run sticks down by clicking them too much. So I'm kind of always hesitant to do that. D-pad is supposedly all over the place. So some people get good D-pads, some people get bad D-pads. I mean, it's still not the best D-pad. When it comes to D-pads, I'm sorry. I used to be like, you know what, PSP had the best D-pad until, and I should make a video on this, I got a Stadia controller. This is like a super mechanical, large, meaty D-pad. It's amazing. I've played Super Metroid with this, and it feels amazing, even on like a Switch. There's ways to use this controller with Switch. Basically, I can make a video on it. Long story short, there's a dongle. Here's my PS5 controller. Here in case, because this is typically my on-the-go controller, because it works well with mobile stuff and whatnot. But you can get one of these. This is a 8-bit DOE USB wireless USB receiver too. It got literally a firmware update on day 3 of Switch 2's life cycle, like since it launched, and now it supports Switch 2. Before it didn't. Basically, if you plug it in and you have wired mode set up for Pro controllers, it will pretend that it's a Switch 1 Pro controller, so you cannot wake up the Switch 2 with it and stuff. But again, it works now, so that's amazing. And if you want to, for example, use something like your nice PS5 controller with a Switch, you totally can again. And for example, this is also a really great way to expand the compatibility of your Stadia controller if you get one. I'll need to make a video on this. It's in fact one of those work in progress things. Here's a sneak peek for you. And just to wrap up my thoughts on the Pro Controller too, I wish Nintendo let you use this thing with a Switch 1. Unfortunately, they don't. Why? Because let's say, I don't know, you have a word down Switch Pro Controller, or you're looking to get one for whatever reason. You could get this thing and then basically ease the pain of migrating over to a Switch 2, get those back pedals, get a better feeling premium controller. Let's say as a Splatoon player, for example. This thing feels right at home as a Splatoon player, and you can just bind the pedals. I used to use a modded my Switch 1 Pro controller to actually have a whole set of 4 back pedals, and I would play Splatoon that way. It was quite amazing. This isn't as awesome because you have only 2 of these pedals. At first I would press them in accidentally because they don't have that much tension on them, but they're totally fine. It's just a slight adjustment thing. Again, awesome controller. I just wish it worked with Switch 1. Also, I wish it would work outside of, the Nintendo Switch ecosystem. Since Switch is aware of these back pedals, I would love to see what happens when this thing gets, first-party, proper, first-class citizen support as a Steam input device, because you could probably bind these to separate things, I'm assuming. Because, again, Switch is aware of it. I think even games can tell if you're using back pedal bindings, if you use the Welcome Tour. Which, by the way, that game should be free. It's really bare bones. I bought it out of curiosity. It lets you see some cool stuff that they did with the hardware and whatnot. Now on to the last thing I want to talk about. The new GameCube controller. It only comes in this indigo color. One of the cool things they did is they finally added extra buttons, including the home and the capture button. The sticks don't click, you don't have the minus button, but if a game works with it, it does. I've heard it allegedly has gyro. I haven't tested that. If you play something like Super Mario 3D All-Stars with this on a Switch 2, because unfortunately not compatible with a Switch 1, compatibility outside of that is also basically non-existent at the moment, it doesn't work. But in Super Mario Sunshine and 3D All-Stars, because there's no NSL release of it, it actually has working analog triggers, working rumble and so on. So that's awesome. As in terms of the actual feel, triggers feel pretty darn good, although more rubber-domey digital click. The Z button has very short throw compared to my old school OEM GameCube controllers from back in the day. So that's weird. Rubber domes are a little bit snappier. I don't know if this is, a design change or just, rubber degrading over the years. This button's way more tactile. That's totally fine. The D-pad feels way more tactile too. I think they tried to make it better because the GameCube D-pad is trash. Sticks. Just T-freeze, they feel like T-freeze, so when you do minor movements, you can feel the mechanism a little bit. But again, super tight, T-freeze. It feels like a GameCube controller. Rumble is basically the kind of rumble you'd expect. Maybe more toned down, but it's quite close. And I really love that they added all these buttons here. If you consider an older Switch Online controller, for example, the Super Nintendo one. This is my ancient Super Nintendo controller I bought. I absolutely love this thing. It only has CL and ZR, and it doesn't support system rebinding with the Switch stuff. So you cannot get this to, have a home button, for example. Super annoying. I wish they would have put them like right here. So they're actually trying to improve this. Maybe you could expand its functionality a little bit by pairing it with the 8-bit dongle and plugging that into a Switch, or you can just use that for playing games and so on, or just pair it via Bluetooth. This thing isn't wired. This thing is wired. I don't know why they opted to not make this controller wired. It feels quite awesome, but that's besides the point. Again, I just love the Super Nintendo controller. I love this squashed diamond design. I wish Sony ripped this off when they were making PlayStation controllers. So yeah, I mean, thoughts. Should you get a Switch 2? If you have the money, if you're fine with just being an early adopter, dealing with some of the pains of like having very few games, having like missing features like being able to force docked mode or one-to-one pixel mapping for Switch 1 games to make them look a little bit better. Some weirdness with the firmware, like again, I consistently struggle to get the Switch 2 cartridges to read on a Switch 2 after I swapped Switch 1 games. Backwards compatibility in terms of performance is improved, although Balan Wonderworld, my beloved, doesn't run that well on a Switch 2. It still drops frames like crazy. It runs better than on Switch 1, but it's still not great. It's not even unlocked for the FPS still. If, for example, let's say you're getting into the Nintendo Switch ecosystem, I would say you might consider getting a Switch 2 because, again, you're gonna have nicer experiences with some games going forward. I don't know what's the deal with how long Nintendo will be supporting the Switch 1. I think, as far as I know, Metroid Prime 4 will come to Switch 1 and Switch 2. It will be enhanced on Switch 2 with like a 120 FPS mode and so on. So I'm assuming they're probably gonna be doing cross-platform, basically, new releases of first-party titles because that's what really matters. I wouldn't buy this to run like Cyberpunk. It's cool to have cross-progression if you're into that. I haven't bought the game. I'm waiting to buy it on PC first, and honestly, I'm looking to play it path-traced and not to play it at, 30, 40 FPS depending on the mode. I would say, don't think of this as a next-gen console. I see it more as a, as a new 3DS. This thing, this puppy. It's basically an enhanced version of the older system that has some brand new features. Thankfully, you don't have to mod it to basically get an overclock going in games like you have to do with this thing. But it feels like that I am hoping that there won't be doing that many new games, so you're not priced out of not being able to just keep using your Switch 1 because the economy is absolutely cooked right now. Again, if you're willing to go for a little bit of early adopter pain and so on, maybe consider getting one. Splatoon 3 after the patch is amazing. It looks noticeably better to me. Splatoon 2, for example, fixed 1080p. The difference because of how low the resolutions that game was pushing on Switch 1 hardware is insane. But again, you have 720p in Handheld at the moment. And I'm assuming they're not gonna patch that one because that game is basically dead, even though it would be nice to be able to, re-experience an updated version with, high resolutions of things like the single-player campaign and Octo Expansion, because I think Octo Expansion is probably still one of the best things you can play on Switch systems. But here's the thing, at this very moment, if I were to play some games in handheld mode, I would rather use my Switch OLED, which, by the way, has a pain to it because the new dock is not backwards compatible. I understand why you wouldn't be able to use a Switch 2 on a Switch 1 dock of any kind, but why not make it backwards compatible so you can use a singular dock? Let's say maybe you have a setup where you have a Switch dock, some controllers, and people can bring their Switch along and play games. That sucks. Let's say I have a friend who has a Switch 1 and has some digital games we could play. Because I've brought my Switch to people who have their docks, and we would play my digital games. We would just pair up extra controllers. There's this weird fragmentation in the ecosystem right now. They keyed the new dock to just not be compatible, and it sucks. I get it, maybe Joy-Con wouldn't stick in. And yeah, also you can't charge Joy-Con easily on a Switch 2 if you're using Switch 1 Joy-Con. So maybe I'll have to bust out money to get like a charging grip or something. Yeah, it just kinda sucks. As for other things with the Switch 2 dock, it's not amazing, but it's fine. They did the separate back door instead of like a, one that folds out and has a hinge like the old Switch dock. As far as I know, they run numbers, people prefer this thing, so I'm in the minority who doesn't like it. They didn't do much to prevent the Switch 2 from getting scratched up against the dock, as far as I understand. It's probably not a big deal, especially if you're careful, but hey, It's just something that they've had so many chances to fix. They had the OLED where they did a brand new dock. They have Switch 2, they didn't do it. So we'll see again. Honestly, I cannot wait to give money to Nintendo again once they do something like a Switch 2 OLED. At least this release doesn't feel as cheap as the old school Switch, because I absolutely hated Switch 1 Mariko to bits in terms of build quality. And also I hate that, there's some really amazing new controllers that they have that are at this moment locked to Switch 2, even if you want to use them with a Nintendo Switch system, Switch 2 only. And I would really want to be able to shield this controller to people who have a Switch 1 and want to have an upgrade, because then you can bring it along with your Switch 2 and have back paddles and just a better feeling controller overall. Or maybe you want to play Super Mario Sunshine, which in handheld mode would look way better on a Switch OLED than it does on a Switch 2. So yeah, I didn't even buy NSO expansion pack for GameCube stuff, because it literally has one game and I haven't seen anyone talk about the emulation quality. I was hoping to use this with other devices, which it probably is just a matter of time at this point. I think that's gonna be all. Anyway guys, see ya. Meow meow. I don't know if you enjoyed this, if you took anything of value from this, I don't know, like, subscribe I guess. And yeah, also, I don't know, maybe just as a quick thing for someone who watched the whole thing. Here's this thing. You don't have a dot next to C. The tri-wing, tri-point, whatever it's saying, for these roots don't have dots on them like they used to. This is more like a sticker. Again, the back stamps kind of matter if you're into GameCube controllers, but this is very much obviously not an old school GameCube controller.